Why West Africa matters and why these U.S. strikes may not be the end. For many Americans, West Africa feels distant, a blur of unfamiliar names, desert borders, and conflicts that never quite make the headlines. But U.S. airstrikes against Islamic State targets in northern Nigeria have pulled the region back into focus and raised a critical question: is this a one-time warning, or the beginning of a renewed American strategy? Just days after Christmas, U.S. forces struck Islamic State positions in Nigeria's Sokoto state, an area that has become notorious for mass kidnappings, church attacks, and the targeting of Christian communities. President Donald Trump confirmed the operation publicly, framing it as a response to the continued slaughter of Christians. The language was blunt, the message was unmistakable, and for once, the action followed the words. What was hit and why it matters. A huge thank you to our subscribers for your amazing support. To our first-time viewers and guests, we're thrilled to have you here. Your engagement is just as valuable. If you're enjoying this, taking a second to hit subscribe would be fantastic and help us keep creating content you love. The targets were linked to Islamic State's Sahel province, a regional offshoot that has grown more powerful as ISIS lost territory in Iraq and Syria. West Africa has become the group's new frontier, not by accident, but by opportunity. Weak states, vast ungoverned spaces, underfunded armies, and borders that exist more on maps than on the ground. These militants are not operating in isolation. They are locked in a violent struggle with Jenim, an al-Qaeda-affiliated coalition that is currently tightening its grip on Mali. Jenim has gone so far as to block fuel supplies into Bamako, Mali's capital, choking the city economically while testing whether the state can still function. If Mali were to fall entirely, it would mark the first successful takeover of a sovereign country by an anti-Western jihadist movement since the Taliban seized Afghanistan. That is not a regional problem. That is a global warning sign. The Sahel, the world's new terror epicenter. Today, the Sahel, stretching from Mauritania through Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and into Chad, accounts for nearly half of all terrorism-related deaths worldwide. This is where displaced fighters regrouped after their defeat in the Middle East. This is where ideology met neglect. And this is where global attention quietly faded until now. The recent U.S. strike is significant not because it solves the problem, but because it signals something Washington has avoided for years: acknowledgement. Will these strikes protect Christians? This is the question many are asking, especially in Nigeria, where Christian villages, schools, and churches have repeatedly been targeted. The honest answer is this: airstrikes alone will not stop persecution. They can disrupt leadership. They can degrade training camps. They can buy time. But jihadist violence in West Africa is deeply rooted in local power vacuums, economic desperation, and weak governance. Until Nigerian forces supported by intelligence, logistics, and political reform can hold territory and protect civilians, militants will adapt. That said, these strikes do change the calculation. They signal that mass kidnappings and religious slaughter now carry direct international consequences. And for extremist groups that thrive on the perception of Western retreat, that matters. Is this the start of a broader Trump strategy? That remains unclear, but the indicators are mixed. On one hand, several of Trump's advisors favor a reduced global footprint, arguing the U.S. should focus primarily on the Western Hemisphere. On the other hand, this strike shows Trump is willing to act decisively when he believes American values or global stability are at stake. What happens next likely depends on one variable above all others: the actions of the terrorists themselves. If attacks escalate, if Christians continue to be targeted, if jihadist groups push closer to seizing national capitals, then further U.S. action becomes not just possible but likely. Why the U.S. can't simply walk away. America once had a regional strategy, the Trans-Sahara Counterterrorism Partnership, but audits found it underfunded, poorly coordinated, and largely ineffective. Meanwhile, there are discussions inside the Pentagon about reducing Africa-focused command structures altogether. That retreat carries consequences. A vacuum does not stay empty. China and Russia are already expanding influence across the continent, not just with weapons, but with loans, infrastructure, and political leverage. Abandoning West Africa would mean surrendering both security influence and future partnerships in one of the world's youngest and fastest-growing regions. Nigeria, Africa's most populous country, still has the capacity to turn the tide, but it cannot do so alone. The bottom line: the U.S. strike in Nigeria was necessary. It was legitimate, and it was long overdue, but it was not sufficient. West Africa is no longer a peripheral theater. It is a front line, not just against terrorism, but against the collapse of state authority itself. Whether this moment becomes a turning point or just another missed opportunity will depend on what comes next from Washington, from regional governments, and from the militants who are watching closely. Because one thing is already clear, the world can no longer afford to ignore the Sahel. This is Sal Pier, signing off from VlogND, where we work to uncover the true stories of the world and Africa. Thank you for spending your time with us. If you enjoyed the journey, subscribing is the best way to ensure you never miss the next one. We are so grateful for your support.